Hey, I'm Markia. Want to hear something scary?
Beware La Pisadeira. The holidays were always a big deal in the Escobar household because it was a time for festive feasts. Giselle and her younger brother Paulo gorged themselves on all the food their grandmother made, despite the story she told about La Pisadeira, who would visit them if they fell asleep with their bellies too full. Their grandmother claimed the hag punished gluttons by crawling on their chests at night and feeding off their fear, all while they helplessly watched half awake. Giselle knew their grandmother only told them stories like that to scare them, but as she watched, her skinny younger brother scarfed down a third helping. She couldn't figure out how he could eat so much and still look so frail. "You okay?" Giselle asked. Paulo shrugged. "I'm just tired and very hungry. I had nightmares again last night." That night, in their room, Paulo fell asleep in his bed almost as soon as the lights went out, but Giselle couldn't sleep. She was worried about her too skinny brother and his too big appetite. As she stared at the ceiling, she suddenly heard someone moving through the house. It sounded too slow and deliberate to be one of her relatives. With a slow creak, she heard their bedroom door open. The hairs on her neck stood up, and she felt something coming closer. From the corner of her eye, she saw clawed fingers reaching out. A voice laughed softly, and then someone quickly jumped over Giselle. "Paulo!" Giselle gasped when she saw the figure climb on top of her brother. It was a long, slender, haggard, demonic-looking woman with filthy claws. It bent in contortions to perch on Paulo's chest. "Paulo, move!" Giselle shouted. And with that, the demon turned to her with a jagged smile. It was La Pisadeira. Giselle jumped out of bed and pulled on her brother, but La Pisadeira pushed her to the floor. The girl landed on her back, and the hag was on her in an instant. Giselle's body became numb. All she could do was watch in paralyzed horror as claws dug into her chest. La Pisadeira moved its wretched face close to Giselle's. As Giselle's terror grew, the creature's milky yellow eyes glowed brighter. Eventually, La Pisadeira left their room, and the two siblings slowly fell back into an unrestful sleep. The next morning, Giselle asked Paulo if he remembered what happened that night. He shook his head while he kept on eating more and more cereal. Giselle was exhausted and very hungry too, as she poured herself another bowl of cereal. "Something is wrong," their grandmother said as she brought them juice. Giselle looked at her brother and they both began to cry. "We ate too much last night," Giselle explained. "La Pisadeira came, just like you said." Their grandmother snatched their food away and sent them to their room. "No more for you today," she said. That night at dinner, Giselle and Paulo were surprised to see the neighbor's kid, Alejandro, at the dinner table. Their grandmother told him he would be staying the night with them. Giselle and Paulo watched as their grandmother filled Alejandro's plate and only gave them half portions. They were so hungry, and watching Alejandro feast was agony. The siblings both asked for more food, but their grandmother ignored them as she offered the neighbor his second dessert. That night, both Giselle and Paulo stared at the ceiling of their room, unable to sleep from being so hungry. Meanwhile, Alejandro slept on a cot, snoring happily. Eventually, they heard the laugh of La Pisadeira as she crept into their room. The hag leapt onto Giselle's chest and once more tried to feast on the girl's fear. After a moment, it hissed its disappointment and jumped onto Paulo, but found no sustenance. It sniffed the air and smiled as its eyes landed on the snoring Alejandro. Soon, the neighbor was half awake and paralyzed as the demon hag fed. That morning, a very tired and hungry Alejandro left their home complaining of nightmares. As their grandmother prepared them a sensible breakfast, Giselle and Paulo had many questions for her. She explained that an all-encompassing evil like La Pisadeira cannot truly be defeated, only passed on to someone else. Those that overindulged before sleep were in fact ringing the dinner bell for the evil entity. And now that they knew the truth of it, to always be wary of gorging themselves on food, especially if you are someone else's guest.